Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this recording. I'm Nina Kong-Surtees, founder and chief art legacy advisor of Smart Advisory and the hostess of Sunday at Studio series. Before we dive into the interview, I just want to take this moment to honor and celebrate my friend, Jessica Greenwalt, who also has been on my interview series about a year ago. So I'm so excited to have her back. But this time we're going to be focusing her dedication and journey in the NFT space. Jessica is a serial founder with multiple award-winning graphic designer, UX researcher, web developer, NFT strategist, and digital artist, investor, and historical advisor. I'm probably leaving out something there, but as creative VP of Fishport, a cryptocurrency company where she conducts user research and design open source tools to keep crypto users safe, and as a founder of Pixelkeet, a research design firm that helps crypto companies design, build, and launch products that change the world. So today I'm so excited to share another component that Jessica has been working on for the last couple months. It's called DeusX, another NFT platform, which I'm gonna let Jessica explain what that is. And yeah, let's just dive in. And first of all, thank you so much, Jessica, for taking the time. I know you had a lot going on the last several months, but I'm so excited to hear what this project recent drop is, and yeah, just walk us through the process and how it evolved into this form.
Yeah, sure. And thank you again for having me. It's always good to see you. You're one of my favorite people in the art world, as you know. So it's always a pleasure to get to hang out with you on your show, and then also to collaborate how we have behind the scenes to help so many artists. I feel like not enough people know how many successful artists and recently NFT drops that you have personally been behind. And thanks to you, the artists in the analog world or the traditional art world have been able to make that jump into the NFT space. So thank you for that and for being my co-collaborator on all of these things. Yeah,
an honor.
I know I've been off the grid for a bit and haven't been answering my phone as good as I usually can. Yeah, I've been in DeusX mode all day, every day. In the past week, I was up till 3 a.m. multiple nights in a row. DeusX is a 10,101 generated NFT art drop. So 10,101 unique art pieces, if you can wrap your brain around that for anyone who's watching. That's a lot. And they were generated with over 120 hand-drawn trades. And the way this kind of works in the NFT space is an artist, and we have an incredibly talented artist that I've been working with on this drop. His name's Arkin. He is 19 years old. So this is just the start of his career, and he's already so good at what he does. He looks like he's had the 10,000 hour mark of someone who's been in the industry for a while. And he's also wonderful to work with. I've done art direction for countless artists at this point in my career. I can't even remember. I don't have like a number anymore. And there are a lot of wonderful people. For the record, Arkin is one of the top 2 artists that I've worked with as far as his professionalism, his general just attitude. He's so positive about everything. And as an art director, that it makes me nervous sometimes to have someone share their work with me and then have to go back and be like, well, that's cool. However, maybe we need to change all of this and maybe throw out maybe 24 assets and redraw them or do something entirely different. Arkin's been so patient, so understanding, so wonderful the entire time. And as you can see in this preview you're taking a look at right now, his work is incredibly detailed. Comparing it to other generative NFT drops in the space, you can clearly see how much detail and attention has been put into each asset that you find on your character.
Yeah, that's really incredible. Yeah, can you just walk us through the whole concept? Because it's so fascinating to me that like the holder of the NFTs, one of these NFTs that you're featuring, gets to vote, and like as they walk through this journey, they actually are part of the whole process of creating this legacy or legend. Can you walk us through how that really works? Because it's really fascinating to me.
It is so cool. It takes art ownership to the next level, which is something I think you could really appreciate. So, under normal circumstances, you go to a gallery, you see a piece you like, you buy it, you take it home, you get to display it to whoever comes over to your house, right? Maybe you take a picture, you put it up on social. Now, in the NFT world, it's a completely different situation. You buy one of these pieces from a drop, and oftentimes that the ownership of that piece actually comes with some rights. And in the case of our collection, it comes with non-exclusive commercial rights to reproduce the work, reuse it, create derivatives of it as you see fit. So think of it this way. If you were there at the beginning of the Marvel universe or Disney, for example, you were there for the founding and they offered you the opportunity to buy one of the characters. So you would own that character and have non-exclusive commercial rights over what you can do with that character. So you can actually build your own storyline, write a backstory for this character, create derivative art, hire an artist to create derivative art for you, and then put out your own storylines. And the cool thing about what's going on in our community is that we give the community the ability to voice their opinion on if they like what derivative art, poetry, stories that the rest of the community, their community members are creating. And if they like it, they can vote it in to the core story, to the official story. So when we're working on partnerships with, let's say there's a movie deal down the line or a series down the line, we can actually go to that creator who is a holder of one of these characters that they purchased from the drop and say like, hey, the community really loves what you put together. We'd like to make it part of the core story. And we would pay them for what they've created, and they would get to enjoy the benefit of having become part of this epic brand that is growing right before our eyes. We just announced this 2 weeks ago, for the record. So you're one of the first people who gets like a one-on-one interview on what is going on behind the scenes on this drop. And within 2 weeks of announcing it, we've had 22,000 people pop into our Discord. Hundreds of fan fiction has been written. Someone wrote a theme song for us, which we worked out with. He's a friend of us, the founders, and we asked him if we could use it in like a promo video, and he gave us the rights to do that. So now you can go to our Twitter and then see the background music in the promo video. That'll happen within 24 hours of announcement. It's been wild. The response from the fans and the community has been incredible, and it makes working on this drop even round the clock, even though I'm like operating on 3 hours of sleep here, it makes it incredibly satisfying, and it just makes me want to go more. Like I don't even feel tired right now because of the energy of the fan base that we have behind this project.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think that when you're really deeply dedicated and love the mission, I don't think it's like it doesn't feel like work anymore, right? It just feels like feel like doing something you love every day. You could breathe and live through and talk about it all day long. I just want to backtrack a little bit. It's so fascinating how this emerged. What is like a backstory? Like, how did you decide to come up with this format and like this narrative of like everyone participating and get to create their own? But how did it all came about?
Well, that's the future of media, is actually letting everyone participate, it being more participatory, and the creators themselves getting more of the action and more of the benefit of having created something in the first place, right? Like you and I come from this art world where you, as a creator, you put something out there, a collector might buy it, they now own it. If they resell it, like let's say you sold it at $100, if you become famous, you've done all this work to build up your brand equity, and that collector goes and sells it for now $1 million. It's not like you, the collector, get a cut of that. Whereas in the NFT space now, the art world we live in now, which I think is the most exciting thing to happen for artists in history, now with NFTs, it can be automatically set so that if this collector who believed in you when you were a starting emerging artist, buys your work for $100, sells it for $1 million. There's an automatic agreement in that contract that can be put in there that gives you, the creator, royalties off of that secondary sale in perpetuity. So the next person sells it, you still get a percentage of that secondary sale, and so on and so forth. So you building brand equity actually helps you, the creator, forever. And we just haven't seen that before. It's amazing. So the evolution of this, like how did we get from earlier this year talking about traditional art and supporting artists in the traditional art world, and then now I'm like deep into the NFT scene, right? I was in a bunch of Clubhouse rooms. I decided at the beginning of 2021, I decided at the end of 2020 really, but I decided at the beginning of 2021, I don't want to work with anyone who's not doing something in the crypto space. I just decided like, that's it. 2020 was my cutoff. I'm done. If it's a company that's not working in crypto space, I just feel like they're not thinking and looking forward to the future that I am anticipating in the world. And I want to be on the leading edge of things, right? Like I've been playing around in crypto for a while, just by nature of being a part of the tech community, but I hadn't really gone all in. I hadn't gone like full, I'm not working with anyone else situation, right? So I did that. Beginning of 2021, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go work for a crypto company. Hadn't decided what one yet. I just knew I wanted to learn from the best. I wanted to be like the understudy to people who really knew their shit. And a friend of mine connected me with Fishport. So Matt and Kyle, who are the co-founders of Fishport, wonderful people, and they're geniuses. They're way more humble than like I'm sure they would be uncomfortable with me saying that. But not only are they brilliant and masters of the space, they're also just super nice guys who are really good at explaining everything. So for the beginning of this year, I basically learned everything that I needed to learn in the space, and I continue to learn, and I continue to ask them questions and bombard them every day about DeFi, crypto, different networks. And then we all got roped into a NFT project. And from there, things just snowballed. There's not a lot of women in the NFT space. So folks got excited about that when they'd see me pop into a room. And then also it's so new. The NFT space is so new. There's not a lot of people who are, I don't know that I'd call anyone necessarily an expert in it, but not a lot of people who have been experimenting with it enough to have fully formed opinions, or at least have run the experiments themselves to tell you what the results were from those experiments. So I was just getting hit up left and right for all sorts of projects and advising different companies and coming to speak. And it became the same. I've become like the crypto nerd of this city for sure. And for a few different other communities, I'm like, you're the go-to crypto dork in the space. And since then, it's been kind of a non-stop ride from there. And once you get in the NFT space, NFTs don't sleep. So from there, and I'm getting to how this all started, I promise. From there, I was in a bunch of Clubhouse rooms, secretly, just lurking, because I was listening in on a bunch of different NFT projects that were dropping, learning from people who are in the community. And I just like to sit back and hear people talk. And this one host, Aaron Haber, who's running the NFT Innovation Society, he was so good. He is so good at talking to people, getting them comfortable, getting them up on stage, educating them on the space. And I just really loved how he did this. And I popped up into one of his rooms and eventually started talking, and then like revealing a little bit more about what I was doing. And then eventually I became less cryptic about what projects I was involved in, and finally came public about working in crypto at all. And he was one of the first people to know that, because he actually reached out and we hopped on a video call, and we were thinking, you know what, we just liked each other, you know, we liked each other's energy. And the first time we hopped on a video call together, he had stacks of the Sandman comic series by Neil Gaiman. And I had really been looking for that set, and I just didn't know where to get it. And we were nerding out about that. And we were like, you know what, we're going to work on something together. I just know it. And it was mutual. We just really liked each other. And we just kept in touch and we kept brainstorming different ideas like, oh, what should we do? What should we do? And then we started looking at artists that we like on Instagram. And we came across Arkin, whose work is incredible. Like, you got to check out his Instagram. And Aaron was like, man, I'll try to reach out to him. It would be really cool. If we could work with him, it'd be really, really cool. So we pinged him. We didn't hear back from him. And we're like, yeah, that makes sense. And we started reaching out to a bunch of different artists and like kind of like checking out their energy, seeing how they'd feel about being part of this project. And then we just weren't as excited about anyone else. Like, they're incredibly talented artists, but there's like something about the comic book look that Arkin had that we just fell in love with, and both being comic nerds, it would be the ideal situation if we could get him. So Aaron's like, you know what? I'm just gonna try. I'll try one more time. I'll try to reach him one more time. If we don't get him, then okay, we'll go with someone else. And he tries again, and then Arkin immediately responds and is like, I'm in. I'm sorry I didn't see your first message. And so then we had our artists. And then we started meeting regularly to discuss what's the story, what's the background for this. And all the other ideas that Aaron and I were discussing before meeting Arkin, we kind of threw out the door because we're like, okay, we have this legit comic book artist now. So we want to do something that's super aligned with his art style. And came up with this future where a team of scientists, and we call them the Science Titans, had created these beings to help humanity. But ultimately, those beings decided to destroy society, as you do. And we take this idea and let people become part of the story, where now the Science Titans have decided to rectify their mistake by creating an army of cybernetically enhanced beings to fight against the cyber gods. But the problem is the cyber gods are pretty brilliant. One of them finds out, hacks into the system, tries to do an override, and then someone comes in and gives the cybernetically enhanced beings, which we call SEBs, free will. So now those 10,101 beings, those are the characters that collectors can buy from the collection and own and create stories for, that are part of this futuristic universe where they can choose if they want to fight on the side of these cyber gods that the Science Titans created, or if they want to fight on the side of humanity against the cyber gods. Or there's a really fun faction that's called Monsters, where you don't care. You're like, you guys do you guys fight, whatever. Maybe I'll hop in if it's entertaining to me. It's totally a wild card faction. And then people can remain unfactioned. And this is actually one of the really unique things about our drop, is that when a collector buys a piece, when they buy a character, they can actually lock in their faction and change the metadata for their NFT permanently once. And it'll actually change the art. The background image behind your character will change according to the faction that you select. And if you leave it unfactioned, you can come back to our site at any time and select a faction in the future. But once you lock it in, you're locked in. And that's the storyline that you're following. And that's the community that you are supporting, theoretically, unless you're trying to be a double agent. And after that, it's out of our hands. It's totally up to the collectors, the community, what they do within those factions and how that shapes the universe.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I think it comprises of everything. It's just like, I could see, like, I could condense this like really like a short summary of art history. Is that, I mean, first of all, like, NFT definitely radically changed how we value things, how we interact with art. I mean, now the art world is finally getting on the bandwagon to like implement the blockchain. I mean, it's been a long coming, but now like the major auction houses are getting into it. But I love the concept. That concept, the DeusX, is like, it reminds me of the 60s, like the happenings. A lot of artists are sort of like anti-institutional. So they are actually doing things like performative aspect where they're not leaving any trace of like objects, but the ephemeral becomes the art object. But they also invited the audience or the viewer to participate in the performance, and it's never the same. Like each performance is different from the previous one. So it kind of reminds me of that revolution that the history experienced in the 60s, where artists sort of decided like, oh, let's just forget this, like the rigid structure of the traditional art. Let's like literally just like merge art and life together and see what happens. I mean, John Cage is like really good example. I don't know if anyone's familiar with 4 minutes and 33 seconds piece. It's a conceptual piece, right? It's like a performer, like a pianist, like really like brilliant pianist, just sits in front of the piano for 4 minutes and 33 seconds in silence. And the concept is the audience, whatever sound they make, coughing sound, whatever, like murmurs, they're creating that performance piece. So it seems to me it's very much in line to that concept of like, it's very conceptual, right? Like, but there's a storyline to start, and then whoever decided change, they're gonna be the one who's gonna be determining the outcome of the narrative.
Yeah.
So that's really brilliant. Didn't mean to go off track on
no,
the
it's
concept,
funny,
but
actually. I'm glad you brought that up about how kind of challenging it's been to get the traditional art world, the institutional art world, into the NFT space, even though they're seeing how much success it's bringing individual artists, right? Like initially I would have thought when we were reaching out to them at the beginning of this, like people on this call, if you don't know, like Nina and I have been behind the scenes trying to help artists get into this space for a while. And we've gotten some pushback from major institutions about this. I don't know if it was just like we don't know what's going on there. I've talked to a bunch of museums personally at the beginning of this year that were like, oh, we're anti-NFTs. We don't do NFTs. And then, lo and behold, 6 months later, they're like, hey, about that NFT thing you were talking about, you think you could help us figure that out now? And I'm like, yeah, eventually, after I get through this like queue of 1 million people now. But it's so funny to me how much resistance there was from the traditional art world getting into the space, not from individual artists, mind you. Like individual artists were like, this is interesting and I like to experiment things. Let's do it, right? It's more like the big organizations, the museums and foundations and all that were just like, I don't know, I don't get what's happening here. I don't know if I should touch that. I don't think I'm going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. And now everyone wants in, which is exciting for me because I think it's just better for artists in general across the board.
Yeah, I think it definitely shifts the paradigm of like the traditional, where artists don't usually get in the secondary market. They don't usually get any returns whenever a collector makes a profit when the work appreciates a certain period of time. Artists don't usually get that. Even like big name artists, they don't get the payout of like if their work gets sold in millions. There's no indication that they're going to get a certain percentage of loyalty. I mean, they do have copyright, but sometimes it's really not enough. So I think the NFT is definitely changing that landscape and bringing the proceeds back to the artists where they deserve, right? Like they're the original creators and they need to be recognized for their efforts and work. Just like speaking of work, right? I mean, when we think about success, when we hear these headlines, like someone making millions of dollars, it sounds so much like, they did this overnight. And in reality, it's not, right? Like we know it's not. It takes so much work. And can you just walk us through the process of minting an artwork on a platform in general? Maybe you could just walk through what that's like. So help the audience to know like what it's involved once they decide to get into that space.
As far as minting, that process actually isn't that hard. It's all the upfront work before you even get to mint. That is the hard work. And that's what a lot of people don't see and doesn't make it into the headlines about, oh, someone made $1.2 million in 9 minutes when their collection sold out. What they forget to mention is that there was months of planning before that, getting the right people lined up, getting the art in order, getting the tech in order, and then making sure that there's utility backing this NFT that you're going to give out to collectors so that there's a reason for them to hang on to it. like thinking about the ongoing value beyond that one drop. There is so much work surrounding the actual minting of the piece that somehow just doesn't get publicized. And it creates this impression to a lot of people like, oh, I'm an artist, I will draw a doodle, and I've seen the NFTs that sell and they look like garbage, so I don't have to try very hard, and I'll just post it up there. It'll cost me a couple bucks, maybe like $125 to mint this piece, and then I'm gonna post it for $600,000 and someone better buy my work, right? And then no one buys it in a day. And then they're like, why isn't anyone buying my NFTs? NFTs are stupid. It's because it's it's so much more work than that. My team and I, and this is a pretty big team actually. We've been up round the clock working on this drop, which just happened earlier this week. And we continue to, after the drop, create things for the community. It's kind of nonstop. There's at least one of us in the Discord, maybe usually two of us in the Discord at any one point in time, interacting with this massive community that we've built, and then taking their feedback, incorporating it into the project, shaping the project, creating the utility that we promised for the NFTs that we produced. Beforehand, there was a lot of meetings between Aaron, Arkin, and I talking about, okay, what's the story, right? Once we got the story sorted out, then it's like, okay, let's talk about the design direction to align with that story. Cool. And then let's discuss the individual assets and how many assets that we want to combine to create these characters that we're going to have Arkin draw. What is physically possible for him to draw in X amount of days, right? Like in a few months. And then we let him loose, and then Arkin just starts drawing. And by the way, that kid can crank out art like nobody's business. There have been days where, also he just doesn't sleep. So I've texted him at like 3 a.m. He'll be up. 12 o'clock in the middle of the day, he'll be up. And I'll be like, hey, can you get me this new outfit? He'll be like, yeah, give me 2 hours. I'll be like, oh, okay. I didn't think it was gonna happen that fast. But no problem for him. He just goes. He's a little Energizer bunny. So working with Arkin to get the assets together and then making some adjustments. There's like the design direction back and forth that we did for a while there. Meanwhile, getting a marketing team lined up, getting a marketing schedule lined up so that there's a series of events and promotions and community engagement that they can go run off and do, so that when we dropped, there would be things for the community to do while they were waiting for the reveal or waiting to be able to buy the assets in the first place. And then you worry, you're worried about minting the entire time, but then you talk about actually deploying a smart contract. And we have, I'm just gonna say, one of the best smart contract devs. I don't know if he'll feel comfortable with me saying that again, because he's so humble, but he's amazing. And he's one of my favorite people to work with. And I'm so grateful I met him. And we're so lucky to have him on this project. But super paranoid, triple checks everything, which I really appreciate about him. He's in the security space after all. So he thinks about these things pretty thoroughly. And then we work together to make sure that the descriptions for the traits are what we want them to be, that the frequency with which those traits show up. So one of the things that happen in a generative NFT drop that collectors are really interested in is trying to get a really rare trait. So, there's 10,101 characters in the case of our drop. And maybe we'll sneak in like a special outfit, right? That only 5 out of the 10,101 have, or like a special accessory that only 10 have. And so we work together on how frequently those pieces should show up in a collection, but it's random. So we don't actually get to control where they show, like which characters they show up on and what other combinations are involved in that image. We just run the generator and see what happens. It's an exciting thing for everyone involved, because the collector doesn't know what they're getting. The creators don't know what they're creating, really. Like, they created the individual assets, but we don't actually know what characters will be built out of them. We're running test generations the whole time, so to make sure things don't look like super crazy. But at the end of the day, 10,101 characters, that's a lot. And there's going to be some surprises in there that I can't wait to uncover. And I've definitely snuck a trait in at the last minute that my co-founder doesn't even know about, that I'm really excited for the community to find out and start posting about. So all of that, all that to say, You get to the minting point, you get to the actual release of the building of the website and launching that. And then there's still support after that, right? Like, yeah, okay, the headline drops and says like, oh, you know, you sold these pieces, you get like $1 million, whatever. It doesn't encompass everything else, like the intense amount of work round the clock that a team has been putting in to make that possible, and to continue. If they're a good team and it's a good project, then they want their collectors to succeed, which is a really big part of the generative NFT projects, as far as I'm concerned, is it's actually making it so that collectors are having a good experience. It's a more participatory, interactive art on like another level. If you have that team with that ethos in place, then they're doing a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do this. It's basically, you know, plus time on a full-time job. And fortunately, I have such a good team, and we're all like family, and we all love working with each other. So it's been a wonderful experience. But you do it with the wrong team, it's probably going to be a nightmare. I wouldn't be doing this with anyone else, and I'm super grateful to my team.
Yeah, that's really amazing. You brought up a lot of good points. I just want to like be able to summarize. Is the first thing you mentioned is right. It takes a village to help artists succeed. Right. We often think artists work. You know, there's a like the myth of like the artists, like the lonely, starving artists, is that like they're hermits, right? They just work on their own. And I mean, it would take really forever to even like be seen and recognized. And people forget there's a team of people behind the scenes. They're usually not on scene because usually the artist gets all the spotlight, but there are a smaller component that goes behind the scene that no one really gets to see. The production aspect of things, the marketing aspect of things, also community building, because community is such an important aspect in the NFT space, especially in the NFT space. So we often forget that. And it's that, yeah. So it's important to recognize it takes a village to create something, or even just to put artists in the right spotlight. And I also love the point that you brought, and one of the aspects is you know, being safe in the crypto space and NFT general. I mean, it's a super important. There's so much noise out there, and a lot of times people get overwhelmed. Is like, well, how do I choose which is the right platform? You know, what do I need to know in order for me to get involved? Because there's so many layers and so many, you know, bad guys are out there too. It's, you know, it's always a good and the bad. When there's a money involved, there's always something good or bad. But how do you know you're in the good community, you're in the right space?
You're right. It is a scary world out there. And naturally, whenever this volume of money is being thrown around, you're going to get scammers. I've onboarded so many people into the crypto space at this point. In this house, like people have come over from the community and be like, can you teach me how to do this? And then we'll hold sessions here and walk people through the process. And it is a multi-step process. The user experience of interacting with crypto or DeFi or NFTs right now, as a user experience designer, I have to say it's awful, right? So I totally get it. I completely understand when people are like, I just don't get this. This is not for me. I can't deal with it. Or if they get frustrated, it's not you. It's the way things are set up right now. They're terrible. Like I always tell people, you know, I get a lot of texts where someone's like, okay, I'm sorry, this is probably a stupid question. I'm like, no, there are no stupid questions. We're dealing with stupid experiences right now. Like you're fully within your right to ask whatever question you have, because the way this whole thing works is stupid. So what I always recommend people, and you know, I work at Fishport, so we've built this tool that helps keep you safe when you're browsing crypto sites online. It's called Fishport Protect. And that's the first thing I have people do when they come over for onboarding. I'm like, just install this plugin and make sure you pin it to your browser, which has a little green icon, so that if you are on the site that you actually want to be on, like metamask.io, for example, it'll be green. If you are on a site that's pretending to be the site that you want to be on, that thing will be red, or it would have just shown a huge error, like don't do this, right? Like go back and then you can look for the proper site. And once that's installed, once that's pinned to the browser, Then I teach people about exchanges, because if you're going to buy NFTs, you need to buy some crypto, right? Like there's already a barrier to entry to that. So I usually, again, not financial advice, and I'm not affiliated with any of these exchanges. These are just the options available. I walk people through how to get set up on either Coinbase or Binance, or depending on their location, whatever works for them. And then show them how to click buy crypto so that they can pick how much ETH or whatever type of currency they want. Usually, if you're buying NFTs, if you're playing in the NFT space with the bigger drops, you're usually going by Ethereum. And then I show them how to get set up on MetaMask, because that is the most popular wallet to use to connect to any of the sites and DeFi and NFT platform websites. And that has its own learning curve. So we've already gone through like 3 different things before you can even get to buying an NFT or minting an NFT. And then once they're set up on MetaMask, then I show them a couple different NFT platforms, most popular one being OpenSea. And OpenSea has fortunately made it very easy for an artist to mint work, to create a collection. There's like a really nice step-by-step. They have as good a UI and user experience as they can have, given the constraints of working with wallets and everything that's interconnected with that. So they've also done something really cool where, like, frankly, trying to experiment in the NFT space costs a decent amount of money. And if you're an emerging artist, like paying $100, $200 or so to mint each piece, that's cost prohibitive. And fortunately on OpenSea, they have a non-gas, like a kind of like a fake minting process where it's not minted till it's bought. So you can actually post that work without having to pay these ridiculous gas fees every single time. So you can get like a decent collection up. So you could start showing people that you're working in the NFT space, send them your link, and then they can buy it, and then it can trigger that gas fee.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I really appreciate your sharing your insights, because I think the challenge that people generally have, not just the art world, is like the trust, right? You know, like when we think of art world is very, very much like enclosed ecosystem, and it's based on trust and who you know, right? Like, you know, this is why we have all these established institutions to really rely on, because they've been around for like hundreds of years, so they have already built that credibility and was able to sustain. So we tend to, like, by default, going to the more of a traditional realm. I mean, now we're just like in a very early stages where like we're in a pioneering stage where we're like sussing out all these details and try to make it more accessible. But again, you mentioned there's like a barrier of entry because there's so many layers of details to figure things out. I mean, it is like sort of like getting into stock market, right? Like you got to figure out, you know, how long is this company being around? Like, is this going to be sustainable over time, or are they doing the right things that they promise they're going to deliver? So there's a lot of, so like in essence, also the user has to do their homework. I mean, you could rely on what's going on floating around the internet, but it's also like everyone's responsibility to really do their homework and due diligence, making sure that they're getting to the right place. I mean, OpenSea, I mean, they've been around since the early stages, so they already is sort of like most established platform out there that you could just start doing the work. And once you get the hang of it, maybe you could also go into other avenues, see what really works for your purpose.
The nice thing also about working with OpenSea is that there are so many other users of OpenSea. So you have a whole community of people who can help you out if you get stuck, or help you kind of strategize how to work with it, how to work with their new features. Like there are people there that you can reach out to who have been in the NFT space for a while, who've been using OpenSea. With the more, I want to say, obscure platforms, there's not a lot of people that you can reach out to and be like, hey, I've encountered this bizarre error, can you help me? And then you're kind of subject to their customer support and hoping that they get back to you.
Yeah, good luck with that, right? Yeah, I want to also delve a little bit deeper into the subject that you just brought up, is that like in everything else, that it's that women are not not there are many women representing in an NFT space, not just the NFT space, also in the art world too, because this is something that we've been like dealing with in terms of like lack of women representation in the art world. Now we're slowly bringing that back to the forefront. You know, it's nothing wrong with the tradition. There are a lot of women artists in history, but they were not just put on the spotlight for a very long time. So can you talk about you know, tell us about, you know, how we can engage women artists in the NFT space?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. I see this pop up in the community a lot. And I wonder, okay, what is it? Well, why is it? Because we see this in the traditional art world, right? Like male artists just get more recognition for their work and tend to get positioned as the first to do something, even if a woman did it before them. And what causes that, right? Like, how does that happen? Is it because the women themselves aren't comfortable with self-promotion or not putting themselves out there? Like maybe they're too busy doing the actual work instead of marketing themselves? Like, is it a Tesla situation where they're just geniuses working on crazy inventions and aren't necessarily concerned about what the rest of the world thinks about them? Or is it because the rest of the system's set up by guys who can recognize themselves in other men who are coming up in the space and who can connect better with the art that they put out, because there's the shared experience there that they just don't get with female artists? I don't know what it is. And I'd actually love to hear your insight on this, because it does feel a little lonely in certain circles of the crypto space for sure. NFT scene, there's been a huge push to get more women recognized in the space and get more women in the space. And as you know, I work constantly to get women into crypto in general, because I'm like, come join me here. It's a lot of fun and we need more women. and I would just love to see more women benefiting from the ridiculous opportunities that are in the space right now. But when it comes to, let's say, the executive level, like if you are in a room for a platform that's launching or on an advisory board for a fund that invests in NFTs, or you're an advisor for a new exchange or new company, anything like that in the crypto space, I'm usually the only woman in the room. And with this project, we worked really hard to recruit more women. The first front end dev I hired was a woman who's a friend of mine who lives here in Bellingham, and I was really excited about working with her. But for personal reasons, she ended up not joining us and working on the project. And then we had a female community manager, and also for personal reasons, she decided to drop out. And they both got replaced by guys who I love. They're wonderful people. I was just really excited about having a more gender balanced team, and it's not for lack of effort. So it kind of leaves me a little confused. Like, okay, I recognize that I don't get to see a lot of women in the space, you know, and I'm doing what I can on my part to try to get more women into the space, and hopefully get them more recognition. And it's hard. It's not for lack of trying. I don't know what it is. It's hard for me to put my finger on what exactly the reason is that I don't see more women getting more coverage. I can tell you, like, internally, and my team won't mind me saying this, because we're so transparent about everything, and we want to be open about and learn from our experience, right? Like doing this project. So, you know, my co-founder Aaron, he's a guy and has been in like the nerd scene for a while. Arkin, also a guy. So you have my co-founder who's writing the story, the narrative for this project, and then you have the artist, both men. So when we're like in the room talking about what would be cool, initially all the art, they were all guys. Like everything that was being drawn is just one guy after another. And I was like, it would be really cool if we had some women in there. Like what I said was, like, I can't see myself in any of these characters. So it would be hard for me to get into the project and write stories for a character that I just can't relate to at all. Like I don't see myself in there. And it would be great to have some sort of representation in a project that I'm heavily involved in, right? And it was actually harder than I would have hoped to get more representation of women, because you have two guys there who are like, oh, this art is rad, this is so cool. Like, of course, everything looks cool to them, and because for them it's the default that they would be included, they've never really had to fight for representation to see someone like them in an art project or in a media company or in anything like this, like in a generative job. And it was a lot, there were a lot of conversations, a lot of time went into convincing my own teammates that representation, more equal representation or more diverse representation is a worthy cause for this project. Like it took maybe 3 weeks for me to convince them to include a Pacific Islander character in there, because as a Pacific Islander, I don't get to see a lot of us represented in media. And so I was like, oh, it's my opportunity. I can get one in. And even then it was kind of like, it was still a lot of convincing. And I didn't expect that pushback, but then I thought about it. I was like, well, of course, no one in this room that I'm talking to, and I was on like a call with Dio, Arkin, Aaron, and myself. And so it's like 3 guys and me, right? And I'm sitting there thinking like, they can't relate to my experience at all. They've always been default included in a project. They've always been able to pick out a character and say like, oh yeah, I'll be that guy or the other guy, right? They've never just sat there and looked at a project and be like, there's literally no chicks here, or like no one like me here that I can relate to and try to create a story for. So to try to explain why it would be important to show up in a story to people who've always just default shown up in a story is an interesting dynamic, an interesting experience. And of course, they're wonderful people and they totally have empathy for it, but it's like also just a completely different experience than what they're used to. So it was just like the whole thing was a fascinating exercise for me, where I thought like even being at the table, even being like the founder, the co-founder of a project, that it would be easy to just be like, hey, how about we show some women, maybe some Pacific Islanders, maybe something that makes me feel like more included in this project. That was even hard. And here's the thing that kills me about that. I love to create, right? So all this time that is being spent on trying to convince a room full of guys that it's worth the time to include women or minorities or Pacific Islanders in a project. That's time I'm not spending on development, on marketing, on design. And I would really love to direct that time into the project, like move on, be like, hey, let's just have equal representation. Cool, we're good. All right, awesome. Now I'm going to work on this project, right? But what I think a lot of people don't take into consideration is that every time a woman has to fight for representation or fight for anything, like fight for equal pay, fight for whatever, that is time. And it's a significant amount of time, mind you, that is put towards fighting just to get a seat at the table or just to be seen, that could be used on so many other things, including making the company that they work for, the projects that they work for, more successful by directing that energy there. And I would love to just see more women be default included as a given in a project so that they can focus that time and energy on other things.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many theories why women are not being represented. I mean, you touch upon a couple like points, but it's just that I think it's definitely cultural and historical thing that like, we were used to like hearing and living, from our parents and their generation, like being is like, this is a normal thing, but now we're at a point that like, no, this is like out of balance, right? And I think it's also, again, it's about like trust, right? Like people are a little hesitant to like jumping into this new space. where nothing has been really carved out before. So like, I think people are a little bit like shy away from like entering in a new space that they have never been. And I think it's always been the case where, like, especially in the financial sector, there's always like lack of women representation. There's always, I don't think it's all across the board, not just in the arts, but it's all across the industry that like there are not enough women, like executives, running the companies. I mean, I think we're just starting. We just started a conversation, right? And now we're trying to like say, yeah, let's take action. We're given this opportunity, and why are we not taking it? I don't know. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that too. It's like opportunities here. We're just now where it's like conversations out in the open. Let's just delve in.
Let me ask you this, because you study art, right? Like, why do you think male artists get more recognition in history books and in media than female artists?
Well, I think it's partly okay. Like if I go think of like some of the critics, they're also male. The critics in the art in the 60s and beyond, they're a lot of majority of the critics were guys, right? Even though there are a lot of women art administrator behind the scene, like if you look at all the like museums and boards, are majority of them comprised of guys. There's always a male director running the museums, or the board is comprised of like. So I mean, I'm not like criticizing or but it's just the way it was structured throughout the history. And I think there's always, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of women artists that like done a lot of things and try to change the paradigm. I mean, they're like celebrated and recognized, but it's just that, the ratio is completely lopsided. There's more male than there's a smaller portion that's just like been recognized. But we're trying to change that, right? Like we're trying to balance it out. Right now it's like, well, we need to have more women getting their solo shows in a major retrospective. Now the guys are also have their share, but now they're like really looking and sussing out, okay, let's revisit the history. Let's bring back all these, give spotlight to all these women. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the way history has been. Like a lot of times women, I mean, in a period, women didn't have any rights, right? We didn't even have a voting rights. They didn't have any rights. It was just a rule. I mean, that unfortunately our ancestors have to go through, right? It was just that women are allowed into schools, for instance. Like in order to be a master painter, you got to study like the human form, the life studies, and women were not allowed to be exposed to any nudity, whether it's like a female nudity. It was forbidden for them to really draw from a live model. Like in the 19th century, all these like big schools, like all these salons, they had all of them were guys. If women, like maybe if women were allowed, they were only allowed to go into take certain classes. So they were already limited in those sense from the training. So oftentimes another woman will just like, or disguise as a man, right? They would do that. Sometimes they would just like, I'm gonna disguise myself as a man or change my name so that, when I sign my name, it's like people won't guess who I am. I mean, there's a lot of authors too. They changed, like George Eliot, right? She changed her name because otherwise she won't be published if she went with her real name. So oftentimes they have to, kind of play that game in order for them to get what they need. Yeah. So I in a sense, it was like a sad history that like our ancestors have to deal with, but now we're like recognizing, I mean, that's gonna change. I think NFTs also bring that, and also art world's changing way of like displaying and looking into history.
It's tough, and like the day-to-day, it can be pretty tough.
I mean, it's also personal too. It's personal reason. I think women are also shy away from something new. I mean, I've seen it, firsthand, but it's personal preference. Nothing wrong with them. It's just like people are kind of shy. They don't end up being in the spotlight. I think that's also women too. Sometimes women have that tendency of like, am I good enough? Or it's everyone's like have a different mindset. I think it's just that women tend to shy away, right? Like I think there was a study where men and women interview differently in a job setting, where like women is always questioned for her accomplishments versus guy is like only questioned for his potential. So there's always a discrepancy between the way we picture prospect employees is that like male versus female, like so I think there's also social stereotypes that's been ingrained in our society, our culture too, the way we perceive what women and men can do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and regarding how women and men interview differently, having had to interview a lot of people, there's a stark contrast between how humble a woman is when discussing her achievements and her skill set versus a guy who might be less qualified, who's quite confident that they are the best person in the world at their job.
Yeah, it's been, I mean, I'm sure it's the study, there are studies like that give you the concrete numbers of that scenario, right? And I think that's it. I think that's part of the equation is that women tend to shy away from their accomplishment. There are less less prone to like share that, because I'm like, oh, is this right? Or sometimes like people tend to ask permissions versus being proactive on things. Like, I mean, it's just the way we were taught too, right? And I'm not saying it's their fault or anything. It's just like culturally taught. Like as a woman, you're not allowed to ask questions. It's rude to do this. It's rude to speak out loud. You kind of like have to withdraw. I mean, maybe it's different from you. I mean, like I was part of that upbringing where like, oh, I can't ask questions because that's annoying. Not only annoying, it's just like you're not supposed, as a woman, as a lady doesn't ask questions.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the reason that I've had the level of comfort that I've had operating in the tech space is because, fortunately for me, my dad kind of raised me, if I can say this, as a boy, right? Like he didn't care that I was a girl. He didn't give me all these girly toys or anything, or treat me any differently than I think he would have treated a son. As he's an electrical engineer, so he had me working on machines and radios and building things, and put me in every sport possible. He didn't make me feel like women were any different. I actually didn't think boys and girls were treated differently until I got older and boys started to comment and call me a tomboy. Like they're like, oh, you're a tomboy. I was like, what does that even mean? And they're like, oh, you act like a boy. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, it just didn't even occur to me that there would be a difference. And that's stuck with me my whole life, as I was raised with that confidence and comfort to just experiment and try something without asking permission, which goes a long way. And I credit a lot of my success to that. Sometimes I just do stuff and sometimes it just works out. And that's actually what I really love about the creative community and artists in general. A lot of artists have that tendency to just try something out, even if it's never been tried before, even if they maybe don't have the permission to do it. And they don't care. They're just curious enough to see what happens and willing to deal with the consequences, or just not even thinking about it maybe. And that opens up the doors for so many experiences and so much potential and possibility and opportunity. I would love to find a way to, and I think this is actually changing now, but whatever can be done to give more women, more young girls that confidence and that experience, I think will be world changing.
Absolutely. I think, like I said, like we just started this conversation, right? Just now, like we wouldn't have this discussion like 20, 30 years ago. This was not even like on the table.
Right.
So
I don't know.
I
I don't know
remember
if you'd be hosting, if I'd be speaking on the show or anything like that.
I don't think we would even be here, like operating, like, or running a business. Like, I mean, there are a lot of women pioneers who like actually created a business, like in the 60s. I mean, they were like, they broke the mold, right? They broke the
Yeah.
inventions and things like that. But that takes a lot of courage, which
Yeah.
a lot of people tend to be like, oh, like, should I be doing that? But like, it takes a lot of courage
I would have
to
been one
be
of
able
those
to.
stubborn women, I think.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell me not to do something. So
No, I know. Like, so yeah, so I'm so glad that you were able to like have different upbringing than most majority of women. Not criticizing parenthood or anything, but it's
yeah,
just the way, you know, we were taught, and you know, our parents did their best to do whatever they could to keep us, you know, safe, and sometimes it's a disservice for us to get into the next potential. So I think now, you know, I feel that the future is much hopeful now that we can actually, you know, create more inviting space for women to participate and thrive in this scenario. So I think it's already happening, right? Like, conversation just started. It's just a matter of creating more safer space and give them more confidence to really delve into the unknown territory as NFTs
yeah.
in creating. So we're almost top of the hour, but in closing, I just want to say, is there any announcement that you want to make in terms of DeusX, and as well as like how people connect with you?
Yes. Go to DeusXNFT.com. That's DEUSX, like the letter X dot NFT.com. And you can still mint a character before they sell out. And you don't want to miss out on this because we've got a lot of really cool things coming up on the roadmap. And it's a totally inclusive drop. Like, we have an international team. There are a lot of female feminine traits in there now. You're welcome. So get in there, participate, be a part of the story, be a part of the building of the universe. And I look forward to seeing you in our Twitter and our Discord.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for taking the time. I know you have a lot going on, especially during the live launches and the drops, but I so appreciate you sharing all your insights and your hard work. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you. It's always good to see you.
Likewise. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time. Bye.